Good morning, everyone. I am so thrilled to moderate this opening session of the 24th World Petroleum Congress with someone who's been so important to me, such a dear friend and mentor, and really the man of the hour when it comes to the oil markets, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman.
Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, we sat on a stage 4 years ago when you had just become Minister of Energy. It was your first speech you gave as Minister of Energy in Abu Dhabi at the World Energy Congress. So much has happened in those 4 years. I mean, just days after we were on stage, there was a devastating attack on the Saudi Aramco facilities, followed by a pandemic, which would lead to the largest collapse in demand. And now we are approaching the 2-year mark of a war involving one of the world's largest commodity producers. So, Your Royal Highness, what a 4 years you've been through. I am so interested to see what your dear friend Dan Yergin writes about this period. But the current question I think it's on everyone's minds is the outlook for oil as we think about the last quarter of the year. And you just announced a decision 2 weeks ago that your country will extend its unilateral 1 million barrel a day production cut. It will be reconsidered every month, but you have made that decision through year end. Can you walk us through your thought process in terms of making that decision?
Well, first of all, if you permit me, I'll come back to your queries. By the way, it's not, what worries me is not the last 4 years. They just keep coming. So I wonder if we are finished with all what is the hobula that is happening in the global markets, or be it global affairs. But first of all, I have to say a few words on the amount of gracious welcome that I have received. I'm very indebted and grateful to the reception I've had so far from the Premier herself and her capable people. And I have to admit that unfortunately it's going to be my first visit to Alberta, but would count as the second visit for myself to Canada. First time I was there was 86 in Quebec, going for a university there with some little course there with Professor Antoine at that time. Did talk about, and I still remember the discussions in 86, and I see it even today as relevant as they were then. And that's the difference between me and some others, is that the duration I have spent over the last 38 years almost, since I took a job at the university, all the way to today, it makes me somewhat more conscious of what happened and to try to avoid repeating what happened in so many cases. Be it as it may, as you have mentioned, one of the first things I had was to have a warm reception with a firework 6 days by blowing up half of our capacity. Amin is here, and he and I would remember that day and night. That would never skip our memory altogether. But it really enabled us and enabled the world to see the importance of energy security and how relevant it is only when you go through a crisis like this and situations like this. Otherwise, it has always been conceived as a foregone conclusion that energy security is here to stay, and somebody, somewhere in this planet will take care of that job. And in reality, that doesn't happen this way. What happens is energy security is something that the whole world should be focusing and collaborating in achieving it. And we'll have to use the plural sense of energy security, because it's not just oil, it's not just gas, or for that matter, coal. It's not renewable alone. It's not hydrogen alone. It's all of the above. And because of that, we are focused on delivering a holistic approach to enable us to set an example for everybody that we should do all of the above and focus on mitigating any of the problems that may come our way, again, with that concept of all of the above. Back to your original question. So part of the thought mindset is, again, learning from the good old mistakes. If you went through mistakes or seen others doing mistakes, it is inconceivable to allow yourself to go through a testing of theorems that had proven to be wrong. One of the things that I know, you know, Halima, in fact, you have much better diversity than mine, working on national security issues. The main pillar for energy security is sustainable, stable energy markets, without which people would not be able to invest, without which the clarity and the visibility required for investors to invest would not be there, and the clarity of policies that is emerging, continue to emerge. Somebody would have to outline it properly, but also mindful of what it takes to deliver energy in terms of the size of the investments required and the big ambitions that we all would like to have. And it has to happen with a serious commitment to the idea that whatever we do, we should be cognizant that we still need a thriving global economy, prosperous economy, and growing economies, without which none of us will be happy with the idea that, or satisfied or content with the idea that this economy is going to be there delivering what we are aspiring for. So the balance has to happen between trying to institute tools, mechanisms, and I would argue, as someone who had put a lot of time and effort in developing OPEC Plus and the institutionalization of OPEC Plus and ensuring that OPEC Plus deliver what a typical regulator will do. And I still believe that OPEC conduct is nothing different than what a central banker, a group of central bankers are doing. So it is, first of all, has a benign type of dedications. Two, it aspires to emulate what regulators are doing. Three, it is my personal experience, and I hope that others have had that similar experience, that energy markets need regulating. International energy markets need regulators and regulating, and it has to be a light-handed regulation. It is not the failed experiences of the past when OPEC tried to manage prices, when it managed prices and quantity. Most of these experiences were failing and failed miserably, and there is no country on planet Earth that had suffered the most from the construed approach of market management than Saudi Arabia. I was there when we were producing 10 million barrels by 1981, and I was there in the summer of '85 when we were producing 2.5 million. And it is all about price management as a mean to market management. So we're not doing anything as OPEC Plus today that relates to price targeting. As you can see in some of the outlets that they are talking about, we're targeting prices. We're not targeting prices. We're targeting less volatility, more sustainable markets, more predictable markets. I think we're doing ourselves a favor. We're doing Alberta a favor in doing what we're doing.
Your Royal Highness, I get so many questions. You just mentioned that you're not targeting price, and it's been a consistent message from OPEC. But I get so many questions about your thought process on what metrics are you looking at when you make decisions. So, for example, you're reviewing your unilateral cut every month. What key things do you look for when you think about your policies?
It's not a state secret. First of all, it is not me. I owe to my colleagues in OPEC Plus. You know, in that interview you mentioned 4 years ago in Abu Dhabi, I did say I believe in collective decision-making processes. We should be inclusive. Consensus is paramount. This is if we want to preserve and maintain OPEC Plus. And I think you could testify that I have done all of the above. I really see no difference between a country that like Gabon or Equatorial Guinea and Saudi Arabia, because we contribute, yes, volume-wise not the same, but percentage-wise are the same. So the cohesiveness of the group is important, and therefore I'm here representing a group of producers as opposed process of thinking of me personally or Saudi Arabia per se alone. Be it as it may, I think what departure we have done over the last few years was to not to attend of what is existing today, because today we know what is happening. But we really don't know what will be happening in the next few months. This situation, actually last year and this year, has been exacerbated by so many different sources of anomalies of uncertainties, which makes it extremely difficult. And I'm realist enough to say, although it may touch my personal ego, but I'm quite content with the idea to admit that if I cannot forecast or have that level of certainty on what will transpire over the next few months, I think it's my and everybody's sense of duty should drive us all to say, we don't know, but that's what we have done. We want to be proactive, preemptive, and precautionary. These three words were created to address how we are trying to attend to the situation, knowing the fact that the uncertainties are coming from a multifaceted, people talk about inflation, higher interest rates, recessionary forces in Europe, the hobula, that big impression that China is going to come back and come back fast and furious, but then the reversal was, it's very simple. If you are going to be guided by what is forecasted today and create a motion based on these forecasts, I just would like to take you a short trip backward. Look at what the forecasters were saying in August and September last year. And can you imagine if OPEC Plus agreed to what these forecasters were saying? So we would not have taken that decision in October, and certainly would not have taken the decision in April, and certainly would not have taken the decision that we took in June. And I just wonder what would have happened to oil markets if none of these decisions were made. It's always better to go by my motto, which is, I will believe it when I see it. Which is, keep your astuteness, keep your calmness. It's all a matter of a month or two. When reality comes as it's been forecasted and the glorious forecasts come around, Hallelujah, we can produce more. If not, and it did not happen, you've already taken that precautionary measure, which makes you way ahead of the curve. And that's fundamental. Chasing things, this is not my just personal experience. At any time given, if you don't take measures ahead of the game, if you don't become ahead of the game, chasing the reality has its own toll and will take time to recover, will become more costly to recover, and I'm not sure if you can recover as soon as you wanted to recover.
Your Highness, I have so much I could ask you as follow-on, but I want to quickly go to the issue of Chinese demand, because I remember earlier in the year, you were cautious about the blockbuster forecast for Chinese demand. And there has been so much uncertainty over the summer about a hard landing in China. How do you see the situation with Chinese demand?
First of all, we've proven being correct that we should, being cautious about these things, paid off. But again, it is not our wish to see the situation as it is today, because it is not bad yet. Again, the jury is still out. And this is the fundamental issue. The jury is still out. There are people that talk about services that are moving nicely. However, industrial sector is not. The jury is still out. The jury is still out about what will happen to Europe in terms of growth. The jury is still out about what the central bankers will do in terms of additional interest rates or pause or what have you. The jury is still out about how the US economy will fare within the context of what is happening globally. It's remarkable to see the US economy still going with all the achievement that has been done, considering what is happening globally. But again, look at what we have decided ourselves with some support from Russia on the last decision we've made in August, which is we can do both. We can reduce more, or we can increase. That has been a subject that we want to make sure that the messaging is clear, that it's not about, again, this jacking up prices. It's about this, making the decision at the right time when we have the data and when we have the clarity that would make us in much more of a comfort zone to take that decision.
Your Royal Highness, you just mentioned Russia, and another anniversary is coming up soon, the 7-year anniversary of the Declaration of Cooperation with the creation of OPEC+. There's been a lot of discussion about the relationship with Russia at the head of the OPEC+, at your co-chair role. Can you talk about the working relationship with Russia, from your kingdom's perspective, but also within the sort of OPEC+ framework? I mean, the IEA was out talking about the joint decision leading to significant deficits in the fourth quarter. How should we think about the relationship?
I'd like to refer to the last bit. Can you, and it's in the public domain, look at what the IEA said in October last year, including their head of the IEA. Interviews after interviews and statements and written stuff about the belligerent act of OPEC Plus in doing what they have done. If I was the IEA, I would probably be very ashamed of what they have said during that month, because none of the things that they were warning about has happened. And name me any time that their forecasts were as accurate as one would have hoped for. But, they have moved now from being a forecaster and assessors of market to one of political advocacies. That's their choice, I don't care. But that's why we've discarded them from being using their numbers on the sources that we rely on performance and how we, be it as it may, and again, you know, I'd hate to be saying anything then. The experience that we've had makes us very cautious in believing what is being forecasted. Because the forecast happens today, but a month from now, other things have happened, and therefore the forecast changes. That's why you do update your forecast. Everybody update their forecast. Aramco update your forecast. Our ministry, CAPSAR do update their forecast. Because of what? Because of human limitation in having the foresight to see what will happen globally. Who could have predicted COVID? You were there with me in one room, February 2020, when I talked about
The house is on fire.
the house is on fire and you can't use a garden hose to attend to that fire. Everybody was looking around. You were physically there, and he said, what this guy is talking about. We were in pain trying with our friends in OPEC Plus to get even a cut of $1.5 million. And people were saying, oh, you're really exaggerating.
Remember.
Now, we all had it wrong because in April 2020, we lost somewhere around 25 million of demand. Who could have predicted it? Now, the most important thing is to remember who salvaged the day and who participated in salvaging that day. It was not just OPEC Plus country. We had an OPEC Plus meeting. Then immediately, the day after, we had a G20. It was actually extraordinary G20. And I'm very grateful to see countries like the US, Canada, Norway, Mexico, Brazil, all the G20 countries that are net exporters did participate in cutting. Some of the consuming countries actually participated differently. Like for China, stocking, India, stocking. It was done within the context of the G20. And then we sealed it with the agreement of OPEC Plus, which happened after the G20 because of that Mexico issue. It was Sunday, and what happened? In total, roughly around 19 million of reduction of production or storage, stocking that had happened. Had the world did not collaborate and work that out, what would happen to the energy industry? What would happen to the oil industry in Alberta? What would happen to energy security broadly? How people can forget that if it wasn't for that act and the continuity of the work we have done, how we could have maintained a thriving and prosperous energy industry, I don't know.
Your Highness, I remember that G20 right after that March OPEC meeting, and we just had another G20 meeting in India. And a key theme of this conference, obviously, is pathways to net zero. And there was an important memorandum of understanding signed that you worked very hard on for months on a new India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor that will have a significant clean energy component. I know you worked incredibly hard with your counterparts in Washington on this agreement. I'm just wondering if you could talk about a little bit your working relationship with Washington, because it seems to have improved remarkably over the last year, and also the significance of this new infrastructure corridor.
Well, I have to say that this multilateral agreement or memorandum of understanding, it was preceded by a bilateral agreement, which was signed the day before, which is something that you're right, we've worked for, well attended to by our leaders, especially Crown Prince Mohammed. And the idea here is to make sure that the US plays as a facilitator for bringing the parties together. We want to not only demonstrate we are committed to the idea of transitioning, not only domestically, but also we want to be participant in supporting people to transition. You cannot advocate it without explicitly exercising it. How could you exercise it? We feel strongly that we are the cheapest producer of renewable. We could be the cheapest producers of green hydrogen. Amin is investing in, Aramco is investing in clean hydrogen, not blue hydrogen, clean hydrogen. But again, if you ask Amin, if you ask our friends from Aramco, if you ask us, we're here. We want to sell hydrogen. We want to sell electricity. How do you prove it? How do you prove your intentions and you are not just bragging about it, but you are really a believer that you could do it, you should do it, you could do it, but you need the partners, the committed partners. Because you cannot invest without having the buyer. Somebody has to be the bridge to bring the parties together, whereby a conversation, a dialogue, agreements, multilateral, bilateral, all of the above, and then you bring your companies to go on the execution. What would help the world? What would help the world is an efficient production of hydrogen, an efficient production of green electricity. Where is our ambition? To the roof. We are transitioning ourselves. We're going to go 50% on renewable on electricity. We will use hydrogen domestically. And by the way, I was just in my flight here, I was reviewing what Canada is aspiring to achieve and how it's to be achieved. And I was telling Her Excellency here and the Ambassador, I said, we do see eye to eye, maybe 85% or even higher, on what Canada wants to do and what we want to do. We want to do all of the above. Canada wants to do all of the above. So how do you prove that? By taking it the extra step, by saying, okay, I will become the bridge as Saudi Arabia of trade, of facilitating hydrogen export, of facilitating electricity export. And people spend a lot of time on the politics of the things. And they skip actually the fact that there are telecommunication lines are connected all over the world. Financial engineering is there to allow for cross-border things without having to have the jargon of politics to be the focal issue. You need the off-takers. You need the industry that needs to be investing. We're saying, and I could love to use this platform, come, we keep telling our friends in Germany, in France, in Italy, in India, come with your full force. Come as German Inc. Do the hydrogen, build the electricity, take the renewable, pipe it, wire it, take it across the border. We're there. We will be working with everybody. How you prove it? You have to go into the real deep dive. That's why I was glad to see it was originally supposed to be a 5 parties agreement. Then after consultation, Crown Prince did like the idea that we should also bring Germany, France, Italy, Japan to be co-signees, which actually enable people to see. Now, I think the second stretch is that we're going to do it. We're going to make sure that people understand Saudi Arabia is no longer going to be a hydrocarbon producer or an oil producer. Saudi Arabia is converting to become an energy producer, taking into account that we are the least cost producer. To us, fortunately, to some, maybe unfortunately, but we are there to prove it.
Your Royal Highness, you're also very focused on your mineral endowments, just like Canada. And I attended your Future Minerals Forum last year, and there was a lot of discussion about the huge quantity of critical minerals that will need to be brought out of the ground onto the market to reach these net zero goals. So could you talk about Saudi Arabia's role in developing its mineral resources and how that will help in the transition?
Well, as you know, we're building cars that are going to be in electrical cars. We're building other cars too. We have a huge ambition, as I said, on renewable. We have huge ambition, as I said, in hydrogen. And we see the problem that the world is facing, and we're just starting now. You know, be careful of what you wish for, because if people don't work laboriously today in sorting out the material and making sure that their supply chain has been worked out, and they have the commitments and the assurance that they have the minerals and the materials that are required and the manufacturing capabilities and capacity, I think we could be turning ourselves from one type of energy crisis to another type of energy crisis. And then Jürgen once at CAPSARC, I said, if you think OPEC Plus is a cartel, be careful of what you wish for, because you haven't seen the real cartel yet. And I believe in that, and because of that, we are well endowed with so many materials and minerals, so we want to go for the deep dive on our own minerals. Again, we welcome participation from, and we work with our friends from the Ministry of Industry and Ma'aden as the company. In fact, Ma'aden has now created an international outfit to ensure that they will go abroad and try to capture some of these minerals. We are going to be working with our friends from the US on this issue too, and we don't mind working with everybody on this issue, because again, if we really want to be faithful to the idea that we will be transitioning, we have to also make sure that transitioning happens whereby you end up attending to energy security, ensuring that energy is still affordable and does not act as an impediment to economic prosperity and growth. And if you don't do all of the above, I'm sorry, but I don't think you can attend to climate change issues. You will even be deprived of income and revenue to spend on these things. So, to be faithful, you have to do all of the above. And if you are really want to do it, you should not focus on today, the year, this year, next year, but you have to have a longer horizon, which is the 20 years, the 30 years, and ask yourself the tough question. When you stand in front of a mirror, ask yourself the question, as a politician, am I being honest to people or not? If you are not, you have to change the narrative, and you have to come to a sensibility of what is the art of the possible.
You're right. I have so much I could follow up on that, but I wanted to talk about the issue of energy efficiency. And I don't know if everybody knows this about you, but you were really the father of Saudi energy efficiency. I remember for years I would go see you not at the Ministry of Energy, but at the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center. And there's been so much work that has been done in the kingdom in really ratcheting down domestic energy usage. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. And as we think about, again, the path to net zero, should there be even a greater emphasis put on energy efficiency?
Well, we went beyond that now. We have formulated what we call it the circular carbon economy. And I believe we've been advocating it. We have an exhibition here. I ask all of our friends here to go and visit with it. We've created the Green Initiative. We've created the Middle East Green Initiative. It's all on the ballpark of how can we attend to the four R's. Some of it, we've started it long before. Some of it, we're starting with it now. But we know that we have contours. And we know that we need to achieve, we have our own KPIs. On, for example, reduce its efficiency. Reduce it is producing more gas, less oil to be consumed, liquids to be used. And actually, we will be doing 1 million reduction by 2030. And more important, it's putting the 50% on electricity, and hopefully with time, even hydrogen. So we're making a big score on that. And in efficiency, we're continuing with that efficiency program. 10 years ago, I looked, and those who are working with me then, we looked like aliens. What are you talking about? But this is what reality is delivering us now. We have a very competitive efficiency program that emulates any other efficiency program in planet Earth. Now, the other 4, reuse, recycle, they all give recognition to the idea that CO2 is a material and can be utilized and can be made to good use. We are also looking at ways, oil to chemical, because again, we really believe that if certain sources of demand will be narrowed, well, you have other means of ways of utilizing your hydrocarbon, your molecules. We're focusing on molecules. We're not focusing on the source and what have you. If you don't focus on molecules, you don't open your span to a better thinking and new thinking. And that's why even, people say, why Saudi Arabia is engaged in this Middle East, greening of the Middle East? We're putting real money on greening Saudi Arabia and greening the Middle East, but also more relevant issue is carbon sequestration. You cannot talk to people with a straight face and say, I am committed to transitioning, I am committed to the very principle of Paris Agreement, which is emission reductions of all sorts of emissions, of all the variety of emissions that from all industries. If this is, to me, and I think to everybody, is the Paris Agreement. So we have to deliver emission reductions of all greenhouse gases, of all sectors. And we have to do it. If we want to carry on with that narrative and act as a serious global citizen, we have to deliver on all of those. And we have to take a lead. And if we don't take a lead, how could we reach others? And if we want to bring discipline to the arguments, you have to be there showing it rather than bragging or talking about it. That's why we're moving with carbon sequestration. And I've been reviewing some of the things that we and Canada are doing together. Literally, there is no international activity that we're not a party of when it comes to CO2 emission or even methane emission. In fact, and I don't want to steal the fire from Amin intervention, but Amin will tell you a lot about how we are ranked amongst the producers when it comes to methane emission and CO2 emission. When it comes to upstream, we're second to Denmark. Correct me, Professor. When it comes to upstream and refinery, we're third. Denmark and Norway and ourselves. Methane, I think we are second globally. And it's not my word or Aramco word. it's Science magazine, it's the IEA, it's everybody else. So the narrative, I just want to make sure that people understand we are not to be lectured at, because we've actually done it even before the issue of climate change. We realized in the 70s that there is a value to capture. We have created the biggest industrial cities, Jubail and Yamba, by the narrative capture instead of flaring. We created a power sector, we created a chemical industry, and we're still growing it. And we're producing like anybody, gas. We worked like hell with Aramco in stretching pipelines, in fixing our arrangements with Aramco to be rewarded to exploit gas, using new technologies, even better technology with all due respect, when it comes to the new gas that will come from Jafurah. I would sit here and say, as a regulator, even using better environmental standards than what is being practiced in the very core part of where gas is being produced today. So, I would suggest that even using the next 2-3 days for us to compare with everybody how responsible we've been ourselves when it comes to emission. Luckily, we're not Holland. We don't have so many cows. But I have to create some, it's 42 minutes of serious talk. If we go about phasing out, phasing down, so can I, maybe because a long trip and it's a red-eye trip, I just got in at 6 o'clock in the morning. Can I go and ask our friends from Holland to phase out cows? Because they are emitting. This is the kind of narrative that we see these days.
Your Royal Highness, as you mentioned, we are in the final moments of this session, and I wanted to ask you about COP28 because this is going to be hosted in the UAE. It's being billed as a more inclusive COP with representatives of the oil and gas industry, but also really important voices from the global south and bringing up issues like you mentioned about access and affordability. How do you see the importance of this COP28?
A lot. First of all, we're working with our friends in the UAE on hands on hands, actually. In fact, just 2 days ago, the CEO of the COP was visiting Riyadh, and we have a joint team. In fact, we have an embedded 2 persons working on interchangeably with our friends in the UAE. We have the best facility that you could think of in Dubai to demonstrate what we are doing and what we will be doing, because luckily we have had this expo building which was commanded, and it was built by Aramco, and it was commanded as probably the best building that was built for that expo. We're going to go with hundreds of people. Most of them are young Saudi women and men. They will be there showcasing what we will do, what we will be doing it, how we'll be doing it. We did a lot of prep work during the G20. So most of the things that we've all agreed in the G20, you'll see it there. So that's good part of the homework has been done at the G20. We want to be engaged, like as I said, we have a concerning issue which I flagged and we flagged and continue to flag, which is the issue of energy poverty. We have a program, and the head of the program is here, and he will, with his people, will demonstrate it, that we are engaged in attending to this issue, because again, it is, if people talk about moral issue and what have you, I did say it publicly. I said there is nothing more moral issue than having to uplift energy poverty from the hundreds, if not a billion and some of people that they lack even energy access, let alone clean energy access. So again, we want to do that. So we want to make sure that we demonstrate that we are doing all of the above, willing to be partnering with serious partners, doing all of the above, and we are not shy from demonstrating our further again and again our advocacy that to be responsible policy makers, we have to focus on, again, the trilemma: energy security, energy affordability, and attending to climate change.
Your Royal Highness, we are now in the final minutes, and we started with the discussion about your 4 years as Minister of Energy. You've been in this industry for decades. If we were to concisely sum up the Prince Abdulaziz doctrine, what would it be?
Well, I don't have one.
Well, we debate. We go back and forth a lot on which central bank governor we think you are.
That was in my hobby. You know, I used to follow Alan Greenspan a lot, and I really liked him. But, you know, why you don't give us as OPEC plus the allowance to shroud our decision with secrecy? That has been the act of all central bankers. You never know what they will decide at the Fed. And you will see people focus with their television and CNBC and Bloomberg and everybody.
In the basement, of course.
In the basement. So we have a virtual basement. So why you are denying us the ability to act and behave as a good central bankers? I have a solid, remarkable team. You met them. Good chunk of them are females. We were celebrating one of them 3 days ago by saying at Oxford Center, she was attending a course there. I said, look at her. She knows better than me of what we will do because she is the number cruncher. This is the kind of stuff we do. We're not alien. We're not the 70s OPEC plus or OPEC or what have you. We're there. How many calls I do? How many times I call you?
Yes.
Whenever you put your document and look at, she claims that I don't sleep, which is true. They make me sleepless because I have to follow different time zones. There is no doctrine. You know, I'm calm enough. I've seen lots of people get it up their head, and I pity them. Because I only follow the example of successful people who had one fundamental thing that some people miss, unfortunately, which is humbleness. And remember that you are a limited human being and you really have to do your homework day and night.
I can tell you, you have found punctuation mistakes in my research notes, so you actually do read them very closely, all of our work very closely. Last thing, Your Royal Highness, World Petroleum Congress is going to be held next in Riyadh. We are so excited to be there. Prediction for what we'll be discussing potentially at the next WPC.
How successful Saudi Arabia managed to transition without creating any havoc to its own economy.
Well, on that fabulous note, we will bring this session to an end. Thank you so much, Your Royal Highness.
Thank you, Halima. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Halima,
Larissa.
thank you. What an engaging discussion. Thank you.
Yes, shall we? You're taking us off stage.
And now, Halima, thank you. Your Royal Highness, I would ask if you would kindly stay on stage. We're going to transition now into signing of the contract. As you all know, and as Halima mentioned, Saudi Arabia was selected in Almaty 2022 to host the 25th WPC Energy Congress in 2026. Your Excellency, please come join me. Thank you, thank you. And so today we would like to proceed with the ceremony of the signature of the contract between the National Committee of Saudi Arabia by His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman Al Saud, Minister of Energy and President of Saudi Arabia National Committee, as well as WPC Energy by Mr. Pedro Miras, President of WPC Energy. This is the official kickoff of 3 years of intense work. Are you ready? Go ahead.
On behalf of the almost 100 here existent, representing the we call it the energy ecosystem in Saudi Arabia. Yes, we're ready. And we're going to be ready hosting the MENA Week, which is an activity that prelude the COP. I forgot to mention it. We'll give you a flavor of how ready we are. But in this stretch, 3 years is good enough to. We want to make sure that when we host it in Riyadh in 26, a lot of people would be worried about hosting the forthcoming because no one is going to match us.
Thank you, Your Highness. And with that, we would like to welcome Pedro Miras, the President of WPC, to the stage. Thank you kindly. Welcome, Pedro, please.